Welcome back to Stress-Free Retirement, provided by the Oklahoma Financial Group. Welcome back to this Saturday morning. Doug Rodwell and I are very excited to have a guest here. We're still trying to shake off this last week. Doug and I headed down to Texas.
Let me tell you, it's hard to believe it's been a week ago. I think I'm still tired.
We went down for
I know I'm still tired.
Opening day of dove season. I know it was a lot of work, but as fun as that was, our topic may not be as fun today, but it's going to be very good and useful. We've got a specialist here with us today, a guest by the name of Kevin Turner. Thanks for being with us, Kevin.
You bet.
Kevin is not only a veteran in the long-term care planning area, he's also a U.S. military veteran. Thank you for your service, Kevin. But Kevin has been doing long-term care planning for over 20 years. He is the long-term care planning specialist at Futurity First Insurance Group. We're really excited. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff today.
Yeah, and I've excuse me, Michael, but I've worked with Kevin for probably the last 20 years or so. Is that about right?
Seems longer than that.
Yeah. And I would like to point out, too, that Kevin is a former drill sergeant in the U.S. Army. So, Kevin, thank you for your service, buddy. Appreciate it.
Well, Kevin, I introduced you as a long-term care planning specialist. Can you tell us what a long-term care planning specialist is?
Michael, I help people plan and organize their assets in case they end up in a situation where they need help with their daily activities of living. And it's not always fun, but it's an extremely important function, and it's part of getting your house in order, if you will. But I think it's commonly felt that if things continue like they have, and science progresses, that people are going to continue to live longer.
Absolutely.
And it's just almost a certainty that you'll live long enough that you're going to need help with the things you do the first hour you're awake, dressing and toileting and transferring and those type of things. So I help people plan. I help them realize that they're going to probably need financial help a lot of the time in order to pay for care. And that's basically what a long-term care specialist does.
Not only have you seen it from the planning side, you've dealt with it with personal experience, not only with your in-laws, but I know another couple you're helping, and Doug, for that matter, he's had his in-laws live with him for several years. So I can't talk from experience, but I know the two of you have dealt with this quite a bit. Yes,
I mean, that's true. I have spent 12 years with relatives being in care situations. And, there's a lot of misconception out there as to what long-term care is. And it's something that people drive down the street and they'll see a nursing home, and that's their perception of long-term care.
Yeah.
It's when, grandpa and grandma ended up so old they couldn't do anything, and they ended up in that nursing type of facility. But that's a misconception, because 80% of the care that is given in a long-term care situation is given at home. So you're only seeing the other 20% out there.
And I would think that's what people want too. They want to live their lives out in their house. They don't want to spend it in a facility or in a retirement home if they don't have to.
That's the choice of most people. And nobody wants to be in a nursing home. That's the last option normally. But there's a progression. A lot of times people end up being cared for at home, and then they get to a point where they are unable to do what they need done, even with the assistance of a loved one, and they have to transition a lot of times to an assisted living facility. And assisted living facilities are much different than a traditional nursing home, because it's not required that they have nursing available 24 hours a day, because it's not needed.
And I know we're going to get into this a little bit later in the show, but that's pretty expensive, and if you don't have some sort of plan put together, that could really eat away at your life savings.
That is extremely true, and I've managed to live through helping my mother-in-law and father-in-law. I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit later. It can be devastating, and most people, and everybody's created equally in a different way, especially when you talk about finances. But not everybody can pay their own way when it comes to a long-term care situation.
Well, and Doug, you could probably actually talk about this quite a bit from your experience. I know in your scenario with your in-laws, there's not really any long-term care there to help out. And Kevin, with your in-laws, I know there was some, and we can talk. You can tell their story here in just a little bit. But this might sound like a silly question, but why plan for long-term care?
Well, because if you don't plan for it and you're confronted with it, it's going to devastate your family life. It's going to devastate your finances. It's going to devastate every life as you know it. And it's like anything else. If you prepare properly for it, to the extent that you can address things head on in a much easier manner. So,
yeah. Well, Doug, you were talking a little bit earlier before we started the show about Medicare, and a lot of people have questions. What was that you were saying?
Well, and we visit with a lot of people, and we help them with their Medicare planning.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest misconceptions that we find is that a lot of people think that Medicare is going to pick up the cost of any long-term care needs, and that's simply not true. Kevin, do you find that to be true in
I think
your
that's very
experiences?
true, and it's a hard education to get when you're confronted with that, because if that's your plan, what Medicare helps you with are hospital and medical. They do not help you with custodial care, and long-term care that we're talking about is really custodial care.
What is custodial care?
That's the taking care of the daily activities of living. Okay, not
something a nurse
medications,
has
not
to do.
hospital, and not something that requires a doctor or a nurse or a hospital.
Yeah, just living day to day, just the things you got to do around the house.
And I think a lot of times it's the transition. You know, somebody has a stroke and they're in the hospital, and they get to a point where the hospital determines that they can't do something for them anymore to help them improve. Well, a lot of times they go into a medical center that is a nursing facility that is there for not medical treatment but for therapy.
So let me ask you this, because what I have found, and you may have found the same thing, is that there's a couple reasons why people don't really take a look at or don't want to sit down and talk about long-term care, and probably the biggest one is because it's really not that fun to talk about, right? I mean, it's just not fun. Is there any way to lighten it up and maybe bring a little bit of levity to the conversation, or is it just it is what it is?
Well, to me, it is what it is. It's not a pleasant thing to have to talk about, but it's like anything else that is extremely important in your life. You have to talk about it, and you have to prepare for it. I think there's a difference between just being involved in something and planning for something. And a lot of times when it comes to long-term care, people become involved in it because of their parents or their grandparents, and at that point, it's they notice real quick that there's not anything funny about it at all.
Well, and this is something we're seeing more and more and more as the baby boomers begin to age. And Kevin, you'll mention here in a little bit, not all people needing long-term care are the elderly. There's a lot of younger people out there, I know you'll mention, but we see a lot of people moving into this as the baby boomer generation begins to age. And one other question before we go to our break, we've got here just a little bit less than 2 minutes before we're going to have to go to our first break, but there's Medicare that takes care of our medical needs. We understand that Medicare is not going to pay for those custodial needs, but Medicaid, the state assistance program, will Medicaid pay for someone if they need a long-term care?
Medicaid is kind of the last resort, and it's there as a safety net for people that don't have any assets. And it's not an entitlement. It's something that you have to qualify for by having, in Oklahoma, it's around $2,000 in total assets. So it's a great thing that it's in place to help those that can't take care of themselves. But it's the poorest plan I know of for long-term care if you have other options. When you have Medicaid, you're giving up the options of where your care is given and who gives it.
Yeah. And
that's what's important when you're in the planning process.
Well, we'll be right back after some of these. We're going to take a break here and listen to some of these messages. But before we do so, I want to give you our phone number. If you got any questions you want to call in, I know our answer machine's turned on. You can leave us a message. You can reach us at 405-310-0098. You can also catch us on our website at www.okfingroup.com. That's OKFIN group.com. And we'll be right back after some of these messages. We'll keep talking with Kevin Turner about this all-important long-term care planning. You are listening to Stress-Free Retirement, provided by the Oklahoma Financial Group. Welcome back to Stress Free Retirement, where we talk about everything retirement related. Again, this show is provided to you by Oklahoma Financial Group. We are talking about long-term care planning today, and we've got Kevin Turner here. Of course,
yeah,
Doug
I'm still having my third cup of coffee. I still can't get over the dove hunt.
Yeah, well,
I'll make it though.
You know, Kevin, during our break, you were showing us some materials that you've got that you lean on. And especially that book you talked about and some stuff you can order. Tell us a little bit about that stuff that people can get.
Well, I was going to mention that there is a publication that you can order from and it's a long-term care planning kit, but you can get it from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. You can go online to www.longtermcare.gov and order this, and it is the publication comes back. It's about Oklahoma. It talks about Own Your Future and talks about different situations and planning, and I think it's something that would be beneficial for people. Planning options for your future, resources available for more information, understanding long-term care financing, healthy aging, and staying at home. So it's rather broad in what it covers, but it's good information, and it is a government publication that you can get a hold of. And I think we'll probably talk a little bit different because one of the difficulties in aging, and I think most of us have either seen it or are going through it, and if you haven't, you will be going through it, and that is watching your parents age. And there are a lot of difficult discussions that people end up having, and there's a publication, there's a book that is out that's by Dick Edwards, and it's called Mom, Dad, Can We Talk? Insight and perspectives to help us do what's best for our aging parents, and I'd highly recommend that book. That's
a tough discussion to have.
It's a very tough discussion, and it's those discussions of Dad, it's time for you to stop driving, things like that, and there are a lot of difficulties in that. But as we age, things become more difficult.
Yeah,
you mentioned the driving part. That was the hardest thing for my wife to do, was to take away the keys from her dad.
Right.
It's not an easy thing.
And it's not easy, and that's the reason. One of the reasons that guys like ourselves that do this long-term care planning, especially you, Kevin, to help coach you through that process. And by all means, you're willing to sit down with the children, with parents, whoever it is, and kind of coach them through that process. Because again, we're not here just to talk about insurance. We're here to talk about the planning in general, which includes everything leading up into taking care of them in these long-term care scenarios.
That's true, and you brought up a good point, and the point is that long-term care insurance is just one of the aspects that you can address long-term care with. If it's done properly at the proper time, it tends to be one that more people can afford. But it's just one of them, and what is important is that you know what the other options are, because there are other ways of dealing with the financial burden of long-term care.
Since we're kind of on the subject of the cost, I know we got some national averages when it comes to it, but we've talked about nursing home, assisted living, things like that. There's other types of long-term care. So, Kevin, could you talk a little bit about the different types of long-term care, like facilities, for instance, and some of the costs associated maybe with the nursing homes?
Well, there's a publication that's put out by Mutual of Omaha, and it's the cost of long-term care services. It gives national averages. It gives the averages by state. And a lot of people, it's a kind of a wake-up when they realize, because we're lucky in Oklahoma. Our costs are much lower than many other parts of the country. If you look at the national cost of a nursing home, a private room is around $250 per day.
That's a national average.
That's a national average.
Yeah.
If you compare that to Oklahoma, it's $158. So we're substantially below the national average, but $158,
if
you multiply that times 30 days, that's a boatload of money.
Wow.
And, one of the things that we try to get people to realize is that you alluded to it a little bit earlier. Not everybody that is in a long-term care situation is an elderly person, in their 80s. Almost 40% of the people that are in care situations are under 60.
Wow.
So, different things happen. It's old age isn't the only thing that causes people to not be able to take care of themselves. One of the things that got me involved in this goes back a long ways. There was a wrestler at Oklahoma State named Ray Murphy, and it was back in 1970 when he was taken down to the mat and landed on his head, and he broke his neck. And he passed away 40 years later. But for
Wow.
that 40-year period, he was disabled and paralyzed. And in every year at the OSU football games, they would pass buckets around, asking people to help pay for his care. And you wouldn't believe the cost that family and that he incurred taking care of him over that 40-year period. Does that happen very often? No, it doesn't. That's a very unusual situation. But
I'm sure there were several. I don't know about Ray Murphy in particular, but there were probably a lot of different services or facilities he could have taken advantage of. Especially, like I've heard of these adult daycare facilities. Tell us a little bit about the different locations that people can take advantage of.
Well, if you look at you mentioned adult daycare, that's a relatively new concept, but it's becoming much more popular because if most people that are taken care of are taken care of at home, normally if there's a spouse that's helping take care of them, and they don't have the ability a lot of times to get out and do things that they need to do for their existence, buying groceries and shopping and doing those kind of things.
Doug sees that every day.
Yeah, I've had my my in-laws living with me for 6 years, 2 months, 7 days, and 7.5 hours, and 28 seconds.
Not that you count the minutes or anything.
I say that jokingly. By the way, I'm getting the evil eye here from the guys in the studio. That was a bad joke. I love my in-laws, but you do go through that, and if you don't if they don't have a plan, it's a tough situation for the family.
And it doesn't get easier. And those adult daycare centers is a place where people can drop off a loved one, and they take care of them just like at a juvenile care center. Mm-hmm. But there are adult activities, and the spouse can go out and do what they need to, and can pick them up in 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is. And if there's proper planning done, that's paid for, as part of the pay plan.
And you bring up the money part of this. There's a lot of the financial planning that goes into this, which fits into why we're talking about it on our retirement show. But I know this is a tough question. There's not a clear answer to it. But what's the best way to plan for long-term care?
The best way to plan for it, in my opinion, is to sit down with someone that knows, what they're doing, and have them not only educate you on what the possibilities are, or what the potential is, but what the options are. Because in my mind, everybody has a plan. Mm-hmm. Most people just don't know what that plan is. And
even doing nothing is a plan. Your plan is to do nothing.
Plan, if you don't, in that case, you're self-funding. And by the way, self-funding is an option. I mean, that's an option that some people prefer. Yeah. And if they have the finances to do that, and that's the way they want to spend their money, there's nothing wrong with that. What you don't want to find out is that you're self-insured and that's your plan, and that you don't have the ability to pay.
Well, when you look at the cost, you said it was about $150 a day
in Oklahoma.
In Oklahoma, so that's $4,500 a year, which is what, $4,800, $4,500 a month.
You are tired, aren't you?
Yep, and it's early. $4,500 a month, which is about $54,000 a year. So I guess you got to ask yourself, how many years can you or do you even want to have to pay for that kind of care, home care or facility care?
And what I find is that most people, that's not the way they prefer to spend their money.
Yeah.
If there is an easier way, or a way to have possibly an insurance company pay the lion's share of that, because with proper planning, whether it's through insurance or whether it's through self-insurance or some of the new hybrid products that are available out there, and I think we'll talk about that after the break.
Yeah.
But there's some hybrid products that people that either can't qualify for long-term care insurance, and by the way, it's become more and more difficult. I'll address that a little bit when we get back from the break.
Absolutely. Well, when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about more on the insurance portion of long-term care planning. Some of the options that you have available to you, and even about how the long-term care insurance industry is changing. It's changing really fast. Before we go to the break, let me give you our phone number one more time. Go ahead and go grab that pencil and piece of paper. I'll give you just a second. Okay, that was your second. Now, the phone number is 405-310-0098. You can always call, leave us a message. We'll address it or on the radio show, but, of course, give you a call back, too. website is okfingroup.com. On there you can find all of our contact information. Send us an email, whatever you'd like to do, and we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to Stress-Free Retirement, provided by the Oklahoma Financial Group. Welcome back to Stress-Free Retirement, provided by the Oklahoma Financial Group. Today we are talking about long-term care planning. Of course, I got Doug Rodwell here with us every week. And
now on my fourth cup of coffee.
And this week we've got Kevin Turner with us. Sorry, Kevin. He's a 20-year veteran in long-term care planning. He's also the long-term care planning specialist at Futurity First Insurance Group. You can reach him on our phone number at 405-310-0098. But if you'd like to get an idea of what he looks like instead of just on the radio listening to him, you can go to his website at Futurity, Futurity First, FuturityFirst.com/Kevin Turner. That'll take you right to his website, and you can read a little bit about him and also send him a message if you'd like. Before the break, we talked a little bit about how to plan for long-term care. We talked about self-insuring, the insurance side. Let's just kind of pick up where we left off there. I know we've got quite a bit to talk about in this segment, but let's talk a little bit more about that self-insuring and then, of course, long-term care insurance.
Okay.
Well, on the self-insurance side, Kevin, you had mentioned earlier that is an option, which it is. A lot of people they just want to take that on themselves and they're okay with it. But wouldn't you agree that if they choose that to be their plan, that they should still sit down and make preparations for it? Because if they don't and something happens and they have to utilize that plan and they haven't planned properly, then that could hit them right between the eyes pretty hard.
Absolutely. And look at it this way. If something were to happen today and you had to write a check tomorrow for $5,000 to pay for a care situation, and your plan had been to self-insure, where would that $5,000 check be written from? Would it come out of your IRA? Because if that's the case, we all know that you're going to end up paying, depending on your age, you could pay a 10% penalty for pulling the money out. It's going to be taxable at that point, so you're probably going to have to get $7,500 out to actually have the $5,000. And what we find out is it's information that is needed in order to plan properly. Because to say I'm going to self-insure is fine, what does that really mean?
Right.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Something else I hear a lot is, well, my kids are going to take care of me. They've told me that they don't want me to worry about having to go to a nursing home. They'll take care of me. There's just a lot of things that I wouldn't want my son or daughter to have to do for me to help take care of me. And I think we all would, if we're logical and realistic and think about it, that may not be, as good an alternative as it could be. It may be the only alternative, and if it has to be, and that's the way, that's fine. Yeah. We're not here to judge on that, but what we find is that if people are realistic and really do look at what the options are, that's just probably not one of the best options.
So if they don't want to self-insure, they want to look at other options, and there are some insurance products out there. Could you give us an idea on how those work?
Sure. I want to tell you a quick story about my mother-in-law and father-in-law. And this happened. They own Luke's IGA down in Ardmore, Oklahoma. They're both deceased at this point, but they both went through a long-term care situation. My mother-in-law Lillian was in a actual facility for almost 10 years, a little over 9.5 years. Her husband JC was in a assisted living for a year, and then in a nursing facility for another 1.5 years before he passed away. So they both ended up in care situations, but they went through the planning process with me. And I was relatively new into the long-term care business at that point, and I can remember sitting across from them at their kitchen table.
You had a talented expert with you at that time.
I did. I had my manager, Mr. Doug Rodwell, at the time, and it was amazing. It was successful even with his help, but we sat across from my in-laws, and I happened to be their financial planner, and I had done the numbers, and they were relatively old at the time, 78, 79 years old. And I remember saying, JC, we may have waited too long, because this is at your age, and the fact that you've had open heart surgery within the last 24 months, even though it went well and you're recovering, you may have waited too long, because this is expensive. This in their particular case, it was going to be, around $6,000 a year for their combined coverage, and that's a lot of money. And I said, you may not be able to afford that. And he looked at me and said, well, Kevin, I can afford $6,000 a year. I sure couldn't afford $6,000 a month.
Wow.
And, that kind of put it in perspective, because that's what we were talking about. And when they passed away, before they passed away, at one point they were sharing a room at the Fountains of Canterbury here in Oklahoma City. And it was about $9,000 a month for their care. So, the planning part of it and understanding the costs and being realistic, it's all important. But it's those situations where all of a sudden you're involved in it because of a loved one that really starts to put those kind of things in perspective, to me.
Yeah, and I made a poor attempt at some humor earlier, but seriously, I enjoyed meeting them.
Yeah,
they're a great couple.
They absolutely were. The other things, about the actual long-term care insurance, which, by the way, I think it's important that you look into that, because it's a good part of the planning process. But a lot of times people just say, hey, it's insurance, and I'm insurance rich, and what if I never use it? Mm-hmm. Having been in the insurance business, you hear that a lot. There are a lot of ways to look at that, because it's like any other insurance. It's not important until you need it, for sure.
Yeah.
But you don't cuss yourself because your house didn't burn down after you've had house insurance for 30 or 40 years. You're not real upset that you didn't have a huge car wreck and total your car, and yet you're paying for that insurance. So you need to put things in perspective. There's not any one asset that most people have that's more important than themselves.
Yeah.
For many, many, many reasons. And you have to be realistic. What if you don't ever use it? I like to think about the fire extinguisher. I have a fairly expensive fire extinguisher sitting in my kitchen. I've had it for years. And I check on it every once in a while, because it's got a little gauge, and I want to make sure that it's still good. I've never used it. But boy, I'm not upset with the fact that I spent good money on a product that, if there's a fire, all I have to do is pull the plug and use it. And I want to make sure it's good and ready to go. And to me, that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about long-term care planning and long-term care insurance.
Yeah, and Michael, you mentioned earlier that my in-laws have been living with me, and they've been there over 6 years now. And he passed away 4 years into the stay with us. He passed away 2 years ago, so he was 94 years old. Good long life. His wife, Lois, still lives with us. She's 92 and just as chipper as ever. But, we're lucky enough to have the accommodations where they can live with us. And I have an amazing wife who is like an angel on earth who takes care of her 24/7.
Hold on. Let's repeat that there, so Doug can get an extra brownie point there. Robin is great.
Yeah, I'll make sure we play that section back to her in the radio show. But
you're absolutely. I see where you're going, Doug. That one of the objections that people give us all the time to purchasing long-term care insurance is that my kids will take care of me. I took care of them when they were little. They can take care of me when I need it. And you might share your experience just a little bit about what it's been like. I mean, not details, but it's been tough on the family having the kids taking care of them.
Yeah, and Robin has three sisters, and for one reason or another, they're. Anyway, I won't get into that. Then I won't get any Christmas cards from them. But it's literally 24/7 care, preparing meals, dressing, bathing, transportation, everything. So
just getting up and down the hallway.
Yeah, getting up, right, walking, and just keeping them company. They don't want to be left alone. They can't be left alone. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it is an ordeal.
Just Kevin mentioned a little bit earlier, when it comes to taking care of your parents, there are things your parents don't want you to ever see, don't want you to ever have to deal with, and I think sometimes this idea that our kids are going to take care of us, there's a little bit of expectations that Kevin had mentioned earlier today, that the expectations may be a little bit too high or not really thought through completely. We don't have a whole lot of time left in this segment. We're going to come back and touch on that just a little bit more. But one of the things we're going to talk about too is actual long-term care insurance policy. How does it work? What are we building? How is it going to work for us? So again, call us with your questions. Check us out on our website. Our phone number is 310-0098. Our website is okfingroup.com. Check us out. Send us an email. Call us. Leave us a question. We'll get back to you. Again, you're listening to Stress Free Retirement on KZLS, The Eagle. Welcome back to Stress Free Retirement here on KZLS, The Eagle.
Michael, just hand me the whole pot of coffee. I'm giving up on the cups, all right?
Kevin, during the break, believe it or not, guys, we talked during the breaks, and the microphones might not be on, but we learned quite a few things. And Kevin, you were talking about how long-term care insurance has really rapidly evolved over the last couple of years. Just we're going to jump into what long-term care insurance is, how it works, when it pays, the benefits, things like that. But how has it changed?
Well, it's changed dramatically. I think everybody that has been involved in this industry has been amazed over the last 4 or 5 years. There have been some very good companies that had very good long-term care products out on the market that decided that they were going to get out of the market. They were going to quit selling their products. And there were reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that people that had purchased long-term care insurance don't cancel it. And a lot of insurance products, they keep them for several years and then decide they don't need them. But this is not one that happened. So the liability to the insurance companies was larger than they had anticipated. And they have evolved with that. They've changed the way that they sell it now. Mm-hmm. The underwriting process was always a little more difficult because of how it was done. They look at mortality, morbidity. But they weren't considered. There wasn't a company 5 years ago that I'm aware of that had charged different rates based on gender. Today, there is a different rate. Women cost more than men, and there's a reason for that.
They live longer, don't they?
I think the actuaries visited a nursing home and realized there were 10 women to every man, and went, oh my gosh, well, maybe we should consider that. And I'm being a little facetious there, but that's true. There was a time when you had multiple pay options. There was a 10-pay that was out there that was quite popular. They've quit doing that because they realized that people were getting a big gift there by having a paid-up policy.
I might want to put a plug in for you here, Kevin, but you sold me and my wife our long-term care policies. And you've told me many times that the policy that you sold us cannot be purchased anymore because they've changed so much.
Absolutely. It would be impossible if you could get it. You probably couldn't afford it at this point, to be honest with you. But most of the lifetime benefits are gone, and by that I mean once you are on claim, at one point you could have 3-year, 4-year, 5-year, 8-year, 10-year, or lifetime benefits, and most of what I've done had been lifetime benefits. That's no longer available because of the liability that's there.
I mean, you've kind of jumped into our next piece here a little bit. We understand that it's changing and changing rapidly, and it's all the more important to talk to a planning specialist, not an insurance salesman, but a planning specialist that knows the ins and outs, all these different changes, can look at different companies. That's exactly what Kevin and ourselves do with Oklahoma Financial Group and, of course, with Futurity First Insurance Group. But let's talk a little bit about the long-term care insurance policies. You mentioned benefits and benefit amounts, benefit lengths. Talk about the different pieces and how customizable these things are.
Well, this is a very unique product, and what you need to look at, first of all, you want to make sure that it's affordable. But luckily, you can build a long-term care policy to suit you individually. Yours doesn't necessarily have to be identical to your wife's. There could be different lengths of coverage. There can be different parts built into it. For example, one of the key parts of a policy is the elimination period, if you will, the deductible part of a long-term care policy.
Sometimes called the waiting period, I think.
Waiting period. Yeah. Elimination period, waiting period, and what is normal? What's the average? Probably, if you look out there, the average is around 90 days, and there are some reasons for that. But the shorter the elimination or waiting period, the more expensive the policy.
And that waiting period means you have to wait that long before benefits are paid.
That's correct. Right? And by the way, what triggers the payment is also important, because it's important to know how it's going to work. if you are in need of assistance with 2 or more of the daily activities of living, most of your policies would say at that point you're going to be evaluated by a nurse or someone qualified to evaluate you. And if it's deemed that you are in need of substantial assistance in 2 or more of those activities of dressing, toileting, transferring, eating, etc., well then your doctor puts together what is called a plan of care. And that plan of care is submitted to the insurance companies. They evaluate it and approve it, and then they pay for that plan of care. Okay? I mean, if that was you needed assistance with cooking two times a week or 3 times a week, or even house cleaning or different things. It's not just the transferring and bathing and those type of things, but it's whatever your doctor says. That has to be the plan of care, and that's what's paid for.
Yeah, and you have shared with me the plan of care that you prepared or had done for your in-laws. So you've been through this.
Oh yeah, I've lived through this. I've lived through it 2 different ways with mother-in-law and father-in-law with a long-term care policy that they each had. And by the way, at the time, I had read where the average stay in a nursing facility was 2.4 to 3.1 years. So I thought, well, a 3-year policy is going to take care of pretty much take care of everybody. Well, that's not quite true, because while that is true, that's the average stay in a nursing facility. As we talked about earlier, 80% of the care that's given is given at home, and that can be given for 1 to 10 years before people transition to assisted living or to a nursing home.
And these policies pay for that care at home.
That's correct. If you have a comprehensive policy, it pays for all the care, whether that care is at home, an adult daycare center, assisted living, a nursing home, Alzheimer's unit, or by the way, if something new comes along, good policies are going to pay for that also.
Yeah. One of the things that I would suggest people will either call us up at 310-0098 and just ask if we could do a review of the policy you currently have, because some of the older policies didn't cover home care and things like that. If you do nothing else but just understand what your policy covers, you'd be doing yourself a favor. And Kevin,
I'll give you a good example of what you're saying there, Mike, because I had a client that I had talked with about long-term care, and they said, hey, I took care of that. I've got that covered. I took care of that 15 years ago. And at the time, 15 years ago, he really did, and he did a decent job for covering the cost of what it would have cost 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. But he had under $100 in daily benefit. And by the way, the daily benefit is a very important part of building the policy. It can be a lot of different amounts, and you need to govern not only what it costs today, but what it'll cost 10, 15, 20 years down the road. It's part of the overall planning process.
Absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about waiting periods, daily benefit amount. You mentioned length of coverage. Used to, I know you could get lifetime benefits. Is it that way anymore?
Nope. It's not there, but there are many different ways. And again, we're talking about long-term care insurance right now instead of some of the hybrids that are out there with the coverage that's built in to life insurance policies or to annuities as riders. I mean, there are a lot of good products out there that can be very beneficial to people to assist them with their long-term care insurance policies that they have had in the past or currently have. Or people that can't get coverage because of health circumstances and other things. There are a lot of good products out there. And again, that's just part of sitting down with someone that knows how to plan and not just try to sell insurance.
And if someone wanted to get a hold of you, if they said, hey, I like what I hear, I want to get a hold of Kevin Turner and sit down and see if he could review my situation, how would they do that?
Multiple ways, but you can contact me at my office. That number is 405-254-5106. That's my direct line. And call. It doesn't cost anything to visit. I work with Doug and Michael and the other agents at Futurity. I would be glad to sit down and visit with this and help anybody understand their situation, because I think if you have a good understanding of your situation, we can put a plan together that's going to keep you from being devastated or at least blindsided. Mm-hmm. So,
well, we've talked a lot about long-term care planning today. It's hard to get all the information into 10-minute segments over an hour-long radio show. So it is important to find out what your plan is. Remember, you've got a plan. Whether you know what it is a whole different deal. But call us at 310-0098, or you can also call Kevin on his phone number. Next week, Doug, you've got someone lined up. We think they can make it in. It changes the tone a little bit. We've only got about 20 seconds to wrap it up.
We're gonna have Judy Veazey. She's a real estate agent here in town to talk about some of the decisions people make with their homes when they retire. Some people want to downsize, cut expenses down. So she's going to be joining us, and then we're also going to talk the second half of our show on Social Security options.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to Stress Free Retirement on KZLS The Eagle. We'll see you next week.
The opinions voiced in this program are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, and financial advisor or tax advisor prior to investing. On behalf of Doug Rodwell, advisory services are offered through Investment Advisors, a division of Pro Equities, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Pro Equities, Inc., a registered broker-dealer and member FINRA and SIPC. On behalf of Michael White, investment advisory services are offered through Red Hawk Wealth Advisors, Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor. Both are Futurities First Insurance Group agents. Futurity First is independent of Pro Equities, Inc.